I'm a research assistant, PhD student at the University of Zurich in German literature.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm curating, well, she's going to present me later, but I'm curating an event series in a different literature house on pornography and literature. And I've been moderating literature events.
Yeah, she said you're a good moderator.
Oh, that's very sweet. That's very sweet of her. Yeah, well, yeah. So, yes. It's actually pretty funny because when she reached out to me for this moderation, I was in Vilnius at that time. So it was kind of, I was visiting Vilnius. That was like in January for the first time.
And what is your PhD topic?
It's about, I always tell it differently. It's kind of interesting. I'm very much, like the literature canon from the 70s and 80s, like from like 20th century. It's quite under-researched, and especially like subculture. I don't know. I find like this period super interesting because you have like a lot of it's kind of an explosion of culture, right? You have a lot of subculture that all grows out of counterculture, and a lot of theories. Post-structuralism. You're an expert on that. I read also, and cultural theories kind of emerge in this time, and there is a huge interchange between culture and theory, and this is kind of what interests me about the time, and I'm trying to kind of contribute to a different canon writing.
Yeah, it sounds like a very broad topic.
Does it? It used to be actually even broader, so I'm now narrowing it down. Yeah, in the beginning I was very interested in the reception of the avant-garde and also fascist aesthetics, how it's kind of being...
Okay, that is broad.
Exactly, in the 20th century, and how it's being transformed in the counterculture in the 70s and 80s. And it's still going to be part of my project, but just one part of it.
That's interesting. I can't even imagine which methods are you using to research that, because it's society, and then it's art.
No, I'm really focusing on literature. And like music also.
Okay.
The lyrics mostly. Yes. And of course, I'm just very excited about this time period. You have a lot of interesting performance artists also in that time, especially like from feminist performance artists.
I think since the at the beginning of the 20th century it was a big pool, and
then
it's again this.
Yeah, I'm very much interested in this like neo avant-garde, where they kind of pick up these artistic methods, but it's also a big poison through fascism, because fascism relied a lot, or at least like in Germany, not always, in Italy as well, relied a lot like on the avant-garde poets, designers, so it's super interesting.
Reimagine them, restructure them.
Exactly. Ich brauche es im Fall nicht, das ist gut, ich habe es schon aufgeschrieben. Danke vielmals. Ja.
It's a pity we cannot talk about that.
Well, I'm here, but you're going for lunch, right? And that one it's going to continue.
Is the lunch here, or is the lunch somewhere
in-house? I don't know.
Let's follow the flow.
Yes, definitely. And you're working on a poetics of wormholes? You're working on a poetics of wormholes? No.
I just read his poems, and all Einstein theory came into me. It's like, wow, this is like a wormhole. Now I'm researching how reading of historical novel influenced the people's way of reading or imagining or thinking about history. So how poetics influence.
Oh, that's very interesting, this interchange. Ja, sie sind schon verbindet.
Es teikšu, būs kaut kāds cits grāmatas ierakstīts par mums, jā, ir īstās.
So what
Jā. Nu es neesmu lasījis.
From among the Yanomami.
Mēs te mums meitenēm runājot, protams.
Yanomami. Yes, it's
Right.
quite big nation, and so but they don't have names for persons. So he only got this name Davi from some missionaries. It was already third or fourth name because he forgot the previous ones. And then the other name, Openava, that he came to use for communicating with the white people. He got them from some sand wasps in the forest. The sand wasps were carrying around his head and saying, when you are down, you are
Tieši tā mums meitenēm runājot, tas jau bija tāds mazāks gabaliņš. ZNT universāls.
Yes, they wrote together with this Frenchman. The Frenchman
Uz 5 minūtēm pieauguši.
translated directly from
Nosargāt mīlestību, bet tas jau bija tāds uztiņātrs. Ilustrācijām bija liela loma. Galvenā dzīvē jau tur. Jā, tas bija tāds seksualitātes atklāšana notika ar tām ilustrācijām.
And I guess this book must be something you know really well.
Published in English. Original edition, but
Yeah, yes, of course.
Es domāju, ka manam
I know the author.
Es domāju, pirms man pasākumu ierakstīt par vārdiem. Neredzam publiku. Izrauti moderni.
Virmojam paši savā universā.
Guten Tag, good morning. I would like to welcome you to this, I have to count, I think 5th day of our festival days of Baltic literature. And it's good to see you back here again, or also for the first time. And we have been talking about many things already, about poetry and prose and translations and writing and research. And we've even been drawing caricatures. And now it's the time to go back to the origins, and I think the origin of each author is a reader, and starting with reading. And so I would like to talk about the reading experiences of 4 of the festival authors today. Semjon Hanin, Hasso Krull, Janis Jonevs, and Krista Annabel Szowica. Welcome on our stage. And I'm glad also to welcome Chantal Humner, who is going to be the moderator of the panel today. And she's going to introduce the guests to us. Chantal is a literary scholar. She's assistant professor of modern German literature at the University of Zurich. She curates and moderates events herself, and she conceived, for example, a series of evenings on the topic of pornography and literature in a literature house close by to Zurich, and she's often a moderator on stage here also, last time with the Austrian author Marlene Strerowitz. And you will find the books, some of the books that our authors chose to talk about on these handouts. There should be enough for all of you, and now I'm very curious to know about your reading passions and experiences.
Thank you very much, Isabel von Lanten. Good morning and welcome to this kind of unusual and exciting literature event today. In general, when one attends reading or panel discussions, you never really know what you get. And today, however, I can tell you that it's going to be straightforward. Your next good read is what we promised to you, and this is exactly what we will provide you with. And as our like experts and connoisseurs on this matter, we have assembled 4 very renowned guests from Estonia and Latvia today on stage. And I would very much like to welcome you today, Semjon Hanin, Hasso Krul, Janis Jonevs, and Anna-Krista Beževica. Thank you very much for coming. Before you will reveal your reading tips to us, I'll give a brief introduction to you on your biographies. Kristana Beževica, you're a writer, researcher, and project curator from Latvia. You studied literature and anthropology, and you're doing a PhD as part of the research program Baltic Peripeties of the University of Greifswald. Apart from writing on scientific matters, you are also a lyricist and prose writer. Up until now, you have published a poetry collection called Hunting Life, as well as the short story collection Grey Dog Dreams About Goldfishes. And you are currently working on your first novel, right? Very good. Janis Jonevs, you landed a big hit in 2013 with your debut novel Jelgava 94, which was awarded with several prizes and made into a film. And tomorrow evening, you can watch this at Xenix, and the author is also going to be present for a talk afterwards. A year later, you published a children's book and returned to the genre of prose in 2020 with your short story collection Tigris. You grew up in Latvia and studied cultural science in Riga. Besides writing literature, you work as a copywriter, cultural journalist, and you translate from French to Latvian, among others, the novel Le Grand Cahier by the Swiss-Hungarian writer Agota Christophs. Hasso Krul, you're a poet, a cultural theorist, and a translator from Estonia. You studied Estonian literature and language in Tallinn and have been teaching cultural and literary theory at the University of Tallinn for more than 3 decades now. Since 1986, you have published various poetry collections, and you have received several awards for your cultural commitment and literary work, including the Baltic Assembly Prize for Literature in 2005. Moreover, you're proficient in 6 European languages and have translated works by renowned authors such as André Breton, Sylvia Plath, Allen Ginsberg, and Paul Valéry. Semjon Hanin, one might say that you are passionate about exploring and crossing borders of different kinds, such as media, art practices, languages, and national cultures. You're a lyricist, performance artist, translator, and publisher based in Riga. You grew up in Latvia and studied Russian literature and language in Estonia and Latvia. In 1999, you co-founded Orbita, a collective of Russian-speaking poets and artists in Latvia, which has gained international reputation by its multimedia projects and installations. As a lyricist, you have published several poetry volumes under your name alone, or together with Orbita, the most recent one in 2021, translated into German under the title Aber nicht damit. Well, welcome again. I'd like to begin with you, Semjon, and I'll take the liberty now and give a little spoiler. One of your favorite books is actually from a very renowned Swiss author, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes?
It is, yeah.
Well, tell us about it, please.
We have list of I'm the last one. I thought that I will listen list. Okay, I will start. Yeah, it's maybe a little bit strange to come here and to tell you about Swiss author, because maybe you know much better about Robert Walser, but I like very much the novel The Räuber, sorry for my pronunciation, Robber, and I published even, I have this kind of series of books, because Arubita also is kind of small publishing house, independent, and kind of independent. Yeah, and I published this novel in Latvian translation because there was no translation of any book by Robert Walser in Latvian, so it is first edition of Walser in Latvian. Yes.
And why did you pick exactly Die Räuber? Or Der Räuber, sorry.
I think, yeah, I like other books by Walser too, especially short prose, his microscripts, as it is called in English. But his novels, among these his novels, this is the most strange and most I think for me this book is kind of top of European prose of 20th century, of modernist prose. There is a very strange story about this novel also, because Walser, he spent his last 25 years in asylum, and this is one of the last texts what he wrote, but he wrote it in kind of stenography. He modified stenography for himself, kind of like it is kind of coded. And for 15 years, as I remember, 5 Swiss philologists worked on decipheration of the novel. So it is published very late, and Walser started. It is kind of beginning of 20th century when Kafka appeared. The critics wrote that appeared. About Kafka, critics wrote, appeared author a little bit similar to Walser. Yeah, but this novel, The Robber, was published in 80s. So yes.
Yes. When and how did you discover it? I'm very curious about that.
This is also very good thing, because I read about Walser several times. There was Susan Sontag wrote about him, and I wanted to buy, but I don't read in German, so I bought once a book and started to read. And somehow it wasn't. I thought, what they found there, it's not so interesting. But then I realized that I bought a book by Martin Walser, not Robert. So it's a long story. So yes, I discovered Walser about not it's maybe 10 years ago. Yeah, but it was at once I started to read everything what is translated into Russian, and something because mostly I read in Russian, but also in English. Microscripts I read in English. So this is the story of discover. Yeah.
Is like Robert Walser also known to some of you?
I don't know, is it him who wrote also this School of Beniamenta?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
one of my favorites.
Yeah, there is also a film by. It was hit of. There was a very legendary festival in Riga, film festival, and there was film by brothers Quay. This,
I know that.
Yeah, and many people know this film, and it is based on a novel by Walder. Yeah.
Well, the novel also kind of develops this. Well, it's an artist's novel also. It's about a writer, right? And kind of a concept of poetics of robbery. I'm kind of interested if that's something that appealed to you.
You know, it is very strange book because there it is very strange organized because there is like this hero as a child, and as a young man at the same time, and also he is trying to help us to. Author is telling, I will tell you this, but first I will tell you this, and he's there are a lot of help, which is making this novel very not easy to read, because too much help making it too so it's very complicated text with different kind of layers of personality, and in some moments you don't understand what layer you're in, and it's great thing where like very it's not very complicated text, but it is you read it very slowly because you have all the time to you try to understand in what place of a story you are now, and with whom you are now, what's going on with whom. Yeah.
Do you yourself like to confuse your readers with your writings?
Me?
Yes. You like to write strange texts as well, or?
No, my texts are very simple.
Okay, so you just admire it, like in Martin Robert Walser. Okay, so you told us now about a Swiss book by a Swiss author. Is there also a book from the Baltic regions that left like an impression on you that you can recommend us?
Yeah, I have this in the list here. Also, I published. This is debut by young Latvian author. As I understand, book is on the here. Yeah.
You can buy it outside.
Yeah, in Latvian. It's published. No, Walser is here. But in Andris Kupriš, his book in German, just translated into German, so it is here. The name of the book is Berlin. Yeah. And it is there are short stories plus long story, one long story, one story with the name Berlin. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. What do you like about it?
Yeah, I made this series. It's this a little bit backward about some series. What I'm making series of books. It is a very strange series because there is like very simple design, same as very similar books, but very different like poetry, prose, essays, translations. Just what I wanted to put into this series. Yeah, so this is a choice of editor is the main characteristic of this series. So this book, Andres is writing also. He writes in a very simple way, like, and very бытовые. Common life stories, yeah. But there all the time there is some also. Maybe I like this when subject is a little bit not very
Sophisticated, intellectual.
No, not very определенный. Exact. Yeah, it's a little bit, and Anders making it very good. Berlin is a story about a young man who is for first time in Berlin, and or maybe not first, but he has some adventures there, simple, not some big adventures, but he lost money and so on. Yeah, but it's also very strange because he is making very somehow small switches in this subjectivity. He is all the time also checking how this subject feel in new обстоятельства, new circumstances, new, like this. Yeah.
Yes. So, have you also read like Berlin? Because it's been published a couple of years ago only, right?
I've heard readings.
Maybe Krista.
It's among the books that I'm going to read soon.
Okay, it's on your reading list. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you read? Did you read, Krista? No? Huh.
I moved to Germany and it stayed in Latvia, and now I'm going back.
But you have...
I have bought it, yes.
So, do you have also connection to the city, to Berlin? Or is it just by chance that you chose now this book?
I like Berlin.
Yes?
Yeah. I have been there for many times, yeah. But it's... no, it's not because of... it's because it is good prose, not about... There is no... not about... it's not about me. It's about...
That's very humble, yeah, of course. But I'm just interested if it's also... Well, maybe you like the way this kind of gives you a feel for Berlin, this text.
Yeah, but
because you said you like the prose, so I'm kind of curious.
I had no. I think it's this hero of this story have more adventures than me in Berlin. Yeah, so maybe it gives also some insight in different feelings what you can catch in this city. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Semjon.
Thank you.
Hasso, and now I would like to ask you what books have left like a lasting impression on you.
Well, I chose two among a lot of books that have made an impression. This novel by Andrus Kivirähk, an Estonian writer. The first reason, of course, because it has been translated into so many languages. Basically, you can read it in German, English, or French, and other languages. But then it is a very important book for cultural and I would also say anthropological reasons. It's the heading that is in German Der Mann, der mit Schlangen sprach, and in English The Man Who Spoke Snakish. In Estonian it in fact means mees, kes teadis ussisõnad, the words for the snakes. Basically it's sort of incantation that was used. People started to forget them in the beginning of the 20th century, but in Estonia these were the words that were used to talk with the snakes so that they wouldn't bite you. And it was, it belongs to this very large body of all kinds of incantations, and the word, sõna in Estonian, basically, if it's used in plural, it always meant an incantation. It was never without magic. If you say some words, you already use magic, and if the words are the snake words, then they are meant for the snakes. Of course, you could also talk to other kinds of beings, also spiritual beings, and basically you could also talk to the trees. They didn't answer immediately, but
Did the snakes answer?
The snakes, if they answered, that meant they didn't bite.
Oh, okay.
So that was the answer, and that was very important. But also, of course, in Estonia, there used to be the so-called house snakes. That is, people kept a snake in the household, and it was kind of a sacred animal. It was, there never used to be cats in Estonia before the 19th century.
Okay.
So if there were too many mice or rats, then the snake took care of them, and so people also took care of the snake, and he or she lived somewhere under the building, and they knew they are snakes. And now this novel is it's in fact a comical fantasy novel, and it's about a conflict between some kind of an old way of life and new way of life. The new way of life in this novel is the peasant style living, and people are making a lot of working hardly, and they have strange new stuff to eat that is called leib, that is bread. But this protagonist of the novel, he despises this way of life, and especially he despises their food. Bread is just disgusting for him, because he is used to live in the forest, and even their milk, it does not come from the cows, it comes from the wolves, and so it's full of all kinds of fantastic images and personalities, and it's based on the Estonian oral tradition and mythology, and partly it's just invention, but he reinvents this conflict that if one starts studying this Estonian oral tradition, one finds that it's inherent there, because this peasant culture, somehow it included also the memory of the old culture of hunters and gatherers, and the knowledge of hunters and gatherers, because this this way of communicating with different living beings, non-human beings, it was not invented by the peasants. The peasants are unable to invent something like that because the peasant thinking is very straight and economical and efficient, predecessor of the modern way of life and modern way of thinking. But hunters and gatherers, they just have to get by with everything and everybody around them, and so this peasant culture, it somehow it was animist, of course, an animist way of thinking, and today one sometimes calls it animist beliefs, but in fact, if you go deeper into that tradition, you'll understand that nobody believed anything. It was no belief. It was the way of the way of trying to make a sense of the surroundings, and a way of trying to get by with the others, with the other beings, and it was always quite unstable. So basically, you could always change the conditions, and it was no system of beliefs in that sense. And so, well, that's why I also chose this other book by Davi Kopenaua and Bruce Albert. Bruce Albert is a French anthropologist. I don't know if, Kristana, if you knew the name. He has become quite well known in recent years because of this book, La Chute du Ciel, The Falling Sky in English, that was written together with a Yanomami, a shaman from the Amazon, Davi Kopenaua. And the Yanomami people, they are, of course, anthropologically very scandalous, because there was this, this very repulsive anthropologist, Napoleon Chanian, who was trying to prove with this Yanomami material that the most aggressive culture will always win, and the men who genetically have the most aggressive capabilities always produce more children, and so on. But in fact, he falsified the data, and and he was also quite unethical in his anthropological behavior. And so these ideas by him have been much criticized, and one of his enemies today, of course, is Davi Kopenaua, this Yanomami shaman. He got his name, in fact, this name Davi was the third or fourth name that the missionaries gave him, because he forgot the previous ones, and basically the Yanomami people, they have no names at all. So people get some nicknames when they grow old, but children never get any names, and it's impolite to call anybody by his nickname, or even to talk about a person using his or her nickname in his or her presence. And especially impolite is to talk about dead persons by names. So this might already cause bloody revenge. And so this Taavi Kopenhaua, he has talked to Bruce Albert, and Bruce Albert has translated all it from the Yanomami, and Kopenhaua has, he already says in the preface that his goal is to reach the people on the other side of the world, that is, readers like us. It's not made for Yanomami, this book, but it's written for the others, so that they could start understanding something about the forest, about the Amazon, and about the way different beings live together in the Amazon, and also, of course, this strange disparity between the ordinary way of seeing and the way of seeing the shamans, because it is so different. And the ordinary Yanomami, they perceive the world more like we do. They are very, very similar to, well, basically ordinary Europeans in this sense. But the shamans see it in a different manner. But still they are very important and useful, although nobody, in fact, is never willing to become a shaman because it is so painful. And this thing that becoming a shaman, a healer, is very painful. This is, well, anthropologists know it. It's very widespread all over the world. And also the Siberian shamans, who will, the people who also speak the Uralic languages like we in Estonia and Finland, they have this phenomenon that if a young person gets a call from the spirits, and then he or she will goes crazy, and it's a little bit analogous to some kind of psychotic behavior, but it's not identified with that because, also the people, those peoples who live in the forest, there are also insane people among them. So it's possible to just be out of your mind without having any spiritual capabilities. But if you will become a shaman, then there is some kind of a fight, and the person tries to evade it, and he or she flees into the forest and climbs the trees, and finally, usually the spirits will win, and then he will have the journey, usually underground in the Siberia, where he will meet all kinds of different diseases, so that because he must make a pact with them. You must, it's like some sort of diplomatic work, because you can only heal people if you already know the disease. And some diseases are too dangerous, and they cannot be approached even by a shaman, but other diseases can be approached, and then you offer them something, and they offer something back. So it's like sort of a commercial activity also. And because basically the spirits eat people because, we eat other beings. And so those protective figures, protection spirits of the animals and other beings, they will send the spirits to eat us. And so one must somehow make some kind of, I don't know, in German it's Versöhnung, something like that.
Reconciliation, yes.
Yeah, and so, in Amazon, of course, Schopenhauer, he went into the water, because in Amazon you have to make a pact with the water spirits, and there is, of course, there are also the spirits who come from the sky. I won't tell everything because it will be too long.
You could just keep on talking.
Okay.
I think it's very, very interesting.
There are two different pacts. One is that he goes underwater because he is tempted by a female water spirit, a young girl usually, and the young girls, they are very alive, and they are somehow seducing this young man, and their mother is also helps them, but they must be very attentive because they cannot wake up the father who is sleeping in this, I don't know how it is in English. In Amazon they always speak in those hanging beds. Yes.
Hammock or something.
Yes, hammocks, yeah. The old man is sleeping in the hammock, and this young man, he also goes to the hammock with the girls, but they must be quite quiet, otherwise the old man will wake up and eat this young man in an instant. And then these spirits from the sky, they come dancing on mirrors, and this has nothing to do with sex, because one must be quite purified from all the human smells, and so you cannot, you must be very clean, and you only drink some water for a week or so, and of course it's also a psychedelic state, and when Schopenhauer got this power, then he got instructions from the father of his wife, but the wife was very angry. She didn't like at all that her husband is becoming a shaman. It was repulsive for her, but it happened. And so he's talking about all these experiences, and but this heading, La chute du ciel, the falling sky, it comes from this cosmological idea that in fact we live on a stratum of the world that has once been the sky, but it fell down, and now we live in the ancient sky, but the shamans are working towards that the sky wouldn't fall again. But now, as you see, if you look around yourself, what is happening in our civilization, well, it nonetheless will happen soon. The sky will fall again, and
Doomsday.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these books have some kind of parallel, because they are both directed towards this conflict between new and old civilization. The book by Kivirahk, it's comical fantasy, and it's somehow very playful, but its idea is really serious. And then this book by Schopenhauer, it's written with very serious intentions, but sometimes it is so fantastic like it was some kind of invention. For example, if you read where the Yanomami people get their songs, the shamans will go and get them, but it's at the edge of the world, and there is a tree, a high tree with instead of leaves there are white feathers, but the trunk of the tree, it consists only of lips, only of lips, yes. And those lips are constantly singing, and there is a terrible noise from all those songs, and the shaman must just discern one song, because they will never repeat any song. They only sing a single song once, and then he will go back and sing it.
You gave us a very good impression of how much of a passionate reader you are, and also like storyteller. But I still have one question, because I'm actually wondering, you seem to be very intrigued by the shaman figure, right, and shamanism, and I think you also already mentioned like psychedelic state, and in the recent years, I think one could observe that there was a kind of trend towards, you could see that in Western culture, people would go to Amazonia to kind of do this ayahuasca rituals. Now we have Kim de l'Horizon. Kim won the German and the Swiss Book Literature Prize, and Kim also kind of developed a sense of, I don't know if you read the book Blutbuch, you heard about it, developed a kind of like, a shamanistic poetics also. So there seems to be like a cultural trend, right, in Western culture. Is this something you also observe, like with interest, or?
Yes, I cannot say more than that it seems to me important. The trend is important, yes, because it has not been born just so. It responds to some kind of a personal and cultural need, maybe some kind of need for the whole civilization, because our civilization, it must change. There is no other way. It has become quite obvious that we must change the direction, but how? That remains to be seen.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, I might like make a comment into the audience. I was also instructed that you can actually also ask questions if you like. I try to be like observant, but maybe you can also help me if somebody wants to ask a question. We have to move on, or I'm actually also happy to move on, both of it. I could hear much more about like all those very interesting mythological also stories. I think it seems like it's, at least also from what I heard yesterday at the panel, it seems very, there seems to be in current Baltic writing very much a deep engagement with its own mythology, right? And it's kind of a rewriting of myths is part of some literary trend. Janis, what books have you brought for us today? At least one of them is not very mythological in the straightforward sense, I'd say.
You mean Jaroslav Hašek, the good soldier Švejk, yeah.
Even though it has become sort of a myth also, maybe, I don't know.
But the task for this panel is to choose the book that you are returning to. So I was honest, and because I read it as when I was like a child, as a teenager, and I'm still rereading it, and I'm not even sure if it's a good literature. Sometimes I hate it, but yeah, somehow I return to that. Okay, but everybody knows the story of soldier Švejk, yeah, who is kind of stupid guy, like an idiot, or he kind of pretends to be an idiot to survive in this world. Mm-hmm. But now rereading it, sometimes I think that the essence is that he's not pretending, he's really an idiot. It's just, finally we have to believe him, that he's telling that he's an idiot. Yeah, maybe he is. And
well, does an idiot know that he's an idiot? That would be the question, right?
Yeah, and even this book was like very, very famous in Latvia and in Eastern Europe, but in Czech Republic, when I come to Prague, I always ask to Czech people, do you love Hašek? And they escape the answer. I guess they don't really like them because he mocked everything. But he was himself, Hašek was like a kind of person who really was, he had nothing, he had no borders in his humor, in his laughing. He spent his life as an absolute alcoholic and living like a hobo. And there was a letter from his ex-girlfriend who couldn't bear him anymore. Jarmila, I guess, was her name. But there's this letter, what she writes to Jaroslav Hašek. And she tells, hello, Jaroslav, I have to tell you that your mother has just died. And please try to be a decent human being and come to her funeral. And please do not make a comedy in her funeral. This was this kind of guy that you have to, that he's making a comedy in his mother's funeral, yeah. And that's what the book is about, yeah, that he's like desacralizing, yeah, it's a trickster book, yeah, but, and it's written by a drunk mind, but there is something, this manner to tell. Yeah, and I think I have no way out. Every time when I'm entering a bar, I look at this bar with the eyes of Josef Schweik. And there was this nice, okay, because Schweik is like having adventures all the time, but like, meanwhile, like having adventures, he's constantly telling about another adventures that he had previously. He's like telling stories all the time. And even Laurinus mentioned this one story yesterday, before yesterday, when you were visiting pubs, and that's what Schweik told. There was this one night in Prague when we visited 15 pubs, but we never drank more than 3 beers in one. So we kept it like normal. Okay, and I told you about this Hašek and the Kafka connection because I adore Kafka as well, but Kafka, it's not like Hašek, yeah, it's like someone pretty opposite, I'd say. But what is interesting that Franz Kafka and Jaroslav Hašek, they lived in Prague in the same time, and so the question, did they meet? And of course, researchers have found that there was one evening when they could meet. It was some anarchist politics readings, and both of them were present in public, but it's not known if they talked. But if we think about this universe of literature, then we can ask, did their heroes met? Because Hašek created this Josef Schweik, and Kafka created Josef K. In process. And well, you know how process ended the last chapter when 2 guardians escort Josef K. to the place of execution. And in Schweik is also one chapter when 2 guardians escort Schweik to, okay, this is another stupid story, but these guardians ask him, where are we taking you? Because they don't know, because this is so unorganized. And Schweik, just for fun, says, you're taking me to a place of execution. I'm sentenced to death. And so they have a pity about him, and then they get drunk together. But all these, both Josef Schweik and Josef K. at some moment in the book are taken by 2 guardians to the place of execution. And they walk through the Prague. And if you read attentively, you can make it their route on the map. and they both of them cross Karl's bridge, but they're walking the opposite directions. One goes to death, one goes to adventures. Yeah, one is like tragic figure, another is trickster, and yes, they could easily see each other on this bridge, but yeah, and this like kind of fascinates me. This this kind of well, yeah, that's about Shrek.
You said you also hate the book.
Yeah, because it's like it's so stupid and so unliterary. It has no. Yeah.
Is it?
Everything what Kafka has, Hašek lacks. Yeah, but at one point you start to see something there, and then you think, well, maybe it's not there. Maybe it's just me, or what?
Yeah, well, you are younger, but in Estonia,
not so much.
in Soviet times, several men, several generations in the 70s and 80s knew this book by heart because it was read like an allegory of the Soviet system. You just have to pretend to be a fool and then you get by because the bureaucracy is so stupid. And, they could... some people, they just cited long passages from Švejk by heart, and it was also, the translation was very good, and I think it's a great literary work, in fact. But about this Kafka and Hašek connection, I think they belonged even to the same political party. It was a sort of an anarchist party, but it was called the Party of Peaceful Progress within the framework of legal means, and
the party exists up to this day.
But all the ideas that the party proposed were very strange.
I guess both of them entered the party for very different reasons.
Yes, for example, I think one of the most simplest and reasonable ideas was lowering the price of alcohol.
Was it important for Kafka too?
It was like one biographist of Kafka wrote. No, it was his lover, Milena Jasenska, who wrote that it's impossible for Kafka to get drunk, that kind of person. But I think for Hašek it was possible. Maybe it was impossible for him to be sober. But no. When there is this, the biographers tell that when Hašek lived in Prague, he used to drink 30 pints of beer a day. 30, yeah. And when I arrived in Prague for the first time, I decided to take this challenge and to do that. But I did 17, and then I could, and then I stopped. Yeah, but this kind of proves that this is possible because, like, I'm like not a extraordinary drinker, and I could do 17. So I guess
it wasn't the last time when.
Maybe we should keep on. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's about it. And another book, okay, I'll try to keep it short. It's Janis Jonevs, it's our Latvian classic. I guess every country has a book like that about the situation of the end of 19th century and this country life. Little boy in countryside works as a shepherd, and this idealized vision of connection with nature, and it became kind of part of our national myth. Yeah, Latvian boy so connected directly to divine nature, and and it's in school program, and that's why I think lots of reading people hate this book because of that. But I somehow survived this part, and I start, and I keep reading it again and again, and in fact, this connection with nature and countryside is not so harmonic. This is pretty neurotic book, in fact, and if you read it, then you can see that he feels very lonely. He's like super sensitive child, and he sees the world as a miracle, and always in some kind of daze. He's like high all the time. He goes Sunday to church, and he's like obsessed with all these miracles and pictures, what he's seeing, and he's living like a very simple life, but for him it's getting, these are like super adventures, and this, but well, it's in school, it's presented as a example of how harmonic you can live in this connection with nature and countryside, but if you want, you can find it, it's a book about loneliness and desperation, and that's why I'm returning to that. And well, this was the book that I thought when I was trying to explain to my foreign friends who read in Latvian as well. But at one point I understood that no, they're not getting the point. They're not getting the essence of that. And I tried to explain. I did my best, but no, it's impossible. Only Latvian reader will get this. And then I understood, but maybe that's the same thing with another languages as well. Maybe I have never understood all these James Joyce. Maybe it's not accessible. There is one point which is only for native reader, you know. Well, and of course, Janis Jonevs was very important for me because he has the same initials as me, Janis Jonevs, so I saw it as a sign. Okay, yeah, that's about it.
Well, did you read this book in school? Yeah, and
I'm sure everybody did it.
We had to.
And what is your impression? Did you also return to it, or?
I didn't too much return to it. As a young girl, I guess I also have pointed out the books I read as a young girl, because in the school program there are not many works by who appeals maybe to young women. There are a lot of, I'm sorry, I can appreciate them now, but as a young person, I somehow needed something more. I cannot even say. I guess I got this feeling of loneliness. I could imagine myself in this situation, but since my young age, I really didn't bought the idea of this magical connection with nature. I guess I was more turned to the imaginative values of, for example, the book I mentioned, and for the Green Gables.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about this book. I'm curious. Lucy Montgomery, right? Is the writer. She's a Canadian author, and it's, as you said, she kind of in her text, in her books, there's always some very strong female heroine figuring, right?
Yeah, I guess at that time I need that. And first, about my choice, why I choose to talk about children's books is, I guess, for me as a person, every relationship starts with love. So I fell in love with reading, and then I read a lot, and then I started to write. So it was very important for me as a child. Reading was very important activity for me as a child. I learned.
Did you learn reading very early, or?
Yes.
Yeah?
My mother says I started to read since 3 years old. I don't know if it's possible. I don't believe her that much, but thinking of me as a reader and afterwards as a writer, it's sometimes, of course, I read Dickens and Dostoevsky and all the wonderful books afterwards, but sometimes I think that the books about courageous ants saving the other ants and courageous girls saving the world from something left a bigger impression on me than something I read later. And Anne from the Green Gables, I actually first saw it as an animation because I was born in 1993, and in Latvia it's a time where the Soviet system ended, the free Latvia began, and the writers didn't really had the Latvian writers. They were very occupied by writing books to adults, that everything changed, the economy, the society, everything changed, politics, and there wasn't really many books for children. So translations became very important in the in my world, in the world of Latvian children, and also the series, the many animations. And so first I learned about Anne from an animation. If you have seen the Ghibli version, then a very strong episode is when the Anne breaks her typhoon on another boy's head. And this gave me a lot of courage, I guess, to live. And also in this time when everything is a mess and your parents are very occupied by somehow trying to live in this new world, somehow finding their own place. And you're, as a child, I was never left behind as a child, but emotionally, intellectually, there was this, I had to do a lot by myself, even as a small child. So reading was a tool for me to somehow gather this information, because adults were very occupied with trying to survive, basically. And so this little small Anne was a big inspiration to me. Sometimes a good one. Sometimes we both ended up in trouble, because I was a child who reads and imagines, and also now as a researcher I'm a person who likes practical things, so I don't end up with theory. If I read about some jewels hidden in the ground, I go and dig up my mother's rose garden, and this is not so nice in a way. But also, yeah, those books, and also another book by Zenta Ergle. She's a writer who wrote in the Soviet times, and it's basically a grow-up story who also teaches communism to younger children. And it's a funny story that I think I was 4 or 5. I read those books and I came to my mother and I said, "Mama, I think I'm a communist." And it's funny and it's sad at the same time, especially because my father was very busy of being a part of some national parties in Latvia, building the country. But also it's so normal that you as a child in the 90s just breathe in everything that happens around, and you breathe in the books that are written before the 90s, books that are translated now and written after the 90s. And it's a weird time. And now that I think of myself as a child, I don't even understand how I made sense out of it. I guess, but children are very capable of making sense out of things. And I think that those literary works, those books really helped me to do that. And I don't think I would be a writer if I wouldn't learn those tools of sense-making out of the world through those children's books.
Yeah, but I really made a different sense from that book. I also read this book by Zenta Ergles, that Musmeten Eurunea, speaking between us girls. And the sense for me is that I read it because I wanted to know what do girls think. It was just like an instruction book for me, but okay, it didn't help me much, but it was like a totally different story, and this communism propaganda was kind of present, but okay, but I was older at the time, yeah. So yeah, that's how the books work for us in different ways.
It's a good question if I learned a lot or enough about what girls are supposed to do or think from this book.
Well, I'm actually curious what your parents said, how they reacted when you came to them and told them, I think I'm a communist.
My mother was terrified. She looked me in the eye and said, okay, please don't tell this to your father. So the conversation ended. But a good thing happened after that, because my parents had a big library and I didn't really check what I read. So what did my mother do? She took me to the children's library of the city. And after that, this incident, every week we went to the children's library where I could give my books and take new books. And then she could also more or less see what I read. So I was very happy. I felt like a grown-up person that I'm going to the library. Going to the library is one of the points in my life, the first points when I really felt like a big adult person. I took some books and then, for example, I went at the evening, I went to my mom and said, what did you read last week? And she said, this and that. I said, yeah, I read like 5 books today. I was very proud.
Would you give those books to children nowadays? Like to your friends' children or maybe your family members?
You mean the
Yes.
communist books? Or?
Yes.
No,
both of them. Would you advise it to them? Yeah.
Generation, so it like
Exactly.
kind of helped you to survive. Would you
Yeah.
advise the people now? I won't.
You already have an opinion on that? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think.
Good question. I think I have always thought that children have such a large capacity of taking in everything, and they're so open-minded, they're so flexible in their brain that it's completely okay to give a child anything if you speak afterwards with the child about the thing. And I think, I don't know how our curriculums in Switzerland, but I think giving children's books that they actually like to read is more important sometimes than to give children the books they are supposed to read. At least it worked for me. I fell in love, and then I'm reading a lot of also the books I'm supposed to read as well.
I think Hasso wanted to say something about that.
Yeah, well, it was. It brought to my mind also so many memories from my childhood, because I was also an avid reader already when I was 11 or 12, and I even wrote my first essay when I was 11 years old, because no.
Not yet.
Well,
Not yet.
just listen to me. I was searching for books, new books to read, and then I went to the attic where the old things were kept that were thrown away, and also some old magazines and newspapers and some books unnecessary that nobody wanted to read. And then I found a small book that sounded quite interesting. It was called the manifesto of the Communist Party. And I started reading it, and it brought so many strange ideas to my mind that I started to write my first essay that was called Impressions from the Manifesto. And then when, meanwhile, I was alone at home, and I also somehow I had some kind of fears of being alone, and I also described these fears in this essay because they also belong to among these impressions of the reading. I just thought that maybe some intruders, some robbers are invading the house, and now I'm here sitting alone and reading this manifesto. What shall I say to them? And but finally, I got the essay finished, and I showed it to my father and mother, and they were surprised, and then they started laughing and read it even aloud, and it was really fun. But then they, again, when they had finished, they grew very serious and handed it back to me and said that, "Don't show it to anybody."
This reminds me of myself, because as a child I also, when I thought that parents doesn't understand something as much as they should, I also wrote them letters or little essays and handed in. For example, I wrote a big letter, I think I was 5 or 6, to my mother because she didn't allow me to watch too much cartoons. I think it was Digimon or something. I learned German from that. So, and so I wrote a very long letter for her explaining what is happening there and why should she allow me to watch it. So I don't know. When did you learn how to read?
I think it was at the age of 5.
Oh, okay. I'm still looking for the person who's...
Well, I think we're slowly coming to an end. I had a lot of fun with you, and you gave us some very interesting, I find, and inspiring impressions on different books and also the way you read, and you came to reading. Thank you very much for coming on this late morning. Now it's already lunchtime. I hope you also enjoyed the conversation and it sparked your interest in a couple of books that our guest presented and talked about. There is a book table outside where some of the books are actually available, of our guests, of course, but also the ones they presented. I hope maybe some of you will stay for the next event. Isabel, you anyway gonna talk about it quickly. Community in War Times at 1 o'clock. In any case, I wish you a wonderful day and good time. Thank you.
I've got not much to add, but to thank you again. And maybe the one detail that Semjon had his poetry reading yesterday, and one of the poems started with the phrase, "There was a time when I used to be robbing houses still." So we still have some connections to the Räuber from Robert Walser.
It is written before I read the novel by Walser.
Predestined for that.
You may check books. Yes, you can check when I read it.
And Chantal mentioned the book table. We haven't been able to organize all the books you recommended, but you might find them in English or in French. You also find the books of the authors here on stage, and also some children's books, some classics, and we meet back here at 1 o'clock, and there is a tea station up on the 3rd floor.
Thank you.